And we're live. So, hello everyone. Thank you very much for attending this week's Sifflet webinar demo. Got a lot of you to sign up today, so we're excited to give everyone a demo of the platform, and as everyone already knows, a focus on our agentic features and essentially how we can enable data observability quicker and more efficiently than ever before through our set of agents. We've got quite a bit of ground to cover today. So what we're going to recommend to everyone is we've got a wider part of the team that's has access to the chat. So if everyone has questions as we go through the demo, feel free to just type them into the chat. It should be on everyone's sidebar on the right-hand side of the screen. And we've got the product and engineering teams. I'll be able to answer any questions as we go through. The recording of the demo will also be made available to all of you after the presentation, so you'll have access to it as well, and you'll be able to share it for those of you that are attending. So to quickly introduce myself before we get started, I'm Alex Yorga. I'm responsible for the solution engineering team over here at Sifflet, and I'll be the one doing the demo for everyone today. So the objective of this demo is, again, there's quite a few of you, I believe, who might not be familiar with Sifflet, so we'll give a quick intro to the platform, but then the goal is to really focus on the agentic features within the platform, how they can be leveraged within Sifflet, and essentially the value that they add on top of the existing classic observability solution. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we'll jump right into the demo. Okay, so you should all be seeing my screen. Perfect. All right, so as I mentioned, to start off with a quick intro, so Sifflet is a data observability platform. What that means is that it is a software that will sit on top of your data stack, providing end-to-end lineage and enabling essentially your teams to monitor the flow of data from source all the way to the BI and analytics layer, ensuring that you have full visibility over what breaks, when it breaks, what caused it, and how to remediate it. Now, behind that simple presentation, there's quite a lot of features and quite a lot of options. And so the goal of today is we'll walk you through how, as a data analyst, we can interact with a tool like Sifflet to ensure that even while we only have access to mainly the reporting layer, we can have visibility over the accuracy of our reporting, re-enable trust in the data, and more importantly, and this is where Sifflet really shines, how we can leverage business knowledge and business context into building out more bespoke and detailed monitoring on a Snowflake pipeline. So to start things off, to answer the question of how we would interact with Sifflet the first time around, so Sifflet being an observability tool, from a data analyst perspective, you'd really open up the platform in two cases, whether you're working on building monitoring or you receive an alert about an incident ongoing onto your platform. So to that end, there's several ways that you can be notified of an ongoing incident, one of which, and the most interesting one, is using our Chrome extension. So as an analyst, I could just be connecting to my BI report, not even interacting with Sifflet directly on a regular basis. In this case, I'm looking at a revenue dashboard. And you'll see in the top right corner here, I have a Sifflet widget that's notifying me that there are 3 incidents on tables or views upstream of this Power BI report that might be impacting the quality of this report. So as a user, you've got full customization options in terms of which data quality rules will be reflected here, who has visibility over what. But it's a very easy way for everyone to be always made aware of any upstream incidents that might be impacting the quality of your data. So in here, I've got the 3 volume customer ID incidents that are ongoing. I know who are the owners of this dashboard and who I could reach out to if I've got questions or want to get an update on the incidents, and even going into into more details on the incident in question to understand what's the status, what's the severity level, and what data quality rules are impacting. So the goal of this being, yes, we're making everyone aware of incidents, but also the caveat is that if there are no upstream incidents, essentially I'm also made aware of it by Sifflet not notifying me of any alerts, and therefore restoring trust in the data. So having this visibility accessible at your fingertips through the Chrome extension in a very user-friendly way is the first step towards bridging in, so bringing in the business as much as the engineering teams into Sifflet and data observability. But with that in mind, so let's imagine that I've opened up my dashboard, I'm looking at a set of incidents, and I realize that there's a few errors upstream that are impacting my reporting. The next step I would likely do is I would just jump onto the Sifflet landing page. So in here, essentially what I'm looking at is the dashboard notifying me of How many tables do I have access to? Any ongoing incidents over the last few days? Just giving me a very generic status of my platform and the health of my data stack. You'll notice that I'm also on my orders domain. So Sifflet offers the option to build up subdomains and domains as well, making sure that we've got granular access. So in my case, I'm looking at 8 tables and views as data analyst that only has access to this, whereas there are many more in Sifflet overall in my instance. So if I focus back on the order, so again, I've seen a few incidents in the dashboard. What I want to do now is start investigating and see maybe there's something else that's being impacted and get a better idea of everything that's happening. So a very easy way to do that is jump to my data products page where I've got my orders marked data product and open it up. So I've got a description here essentially highlighting from a governance perspective, what is this data product? What does it do? Who are the owners of this data product? And in the description, understand a bit what metrics am I calculating, who's using it, so on and so forth. And from this point, I can easily jump to my data assets list and get a much better view over which tables are being impacted and what is the health score. So at Sifflet, you'll have high risk, urgent, or no incidents at a very easy sort of health score at the asset level. So very quickly, I can see that there are 4 assets in total that are being impacted or that Sifflet considers are impacted by high risk incidents. So the next step from here is jumping over to my incidents page and understanding a bit more on what are the incidents that are happening. So you'll notice there's only 2 incidents, but there's 4 assets, hence the 4 high risk incidents that were displayed before. And from here, I can start diving in. So the first one I can open up is my order amount incident. And this is where we start touching on Sifflet's agent and the value they bring. So whereas, and I'm aware there's a few customers on the call today, so I'll highlight a bit how Sifflet used to work and essentially the new features that are that are becoming available for everyone today, thanks to the agentic features. So whereas before in Sifflet and in traditional observability platforms, one incident would have been one data quality rule failing. Thanks to our new agents, we're able to do several things to make that process a lot smoother. The first one is one incident now, the easiest way I can put it is translates to a problem. So Sifflet has multiple data quality rules failing, and these are all the different monitors that are bundled together in this incident. And because they're failing on the same metric, on the same schema, on similar assets, what we've done is we've bundled them all together in this one single incident page, which is a problem on the order amount that's happening across both our fact orders table as well as our staging orders table. And there's several monitors in place that are checking every 15 minutes, every day as a full data set scan, but essentially pointing out that there's anomalies happening on my order amount. And I've got the full history here on the right as well of these respective monitors, when have they failed, and you'll see here that Sifflet is automatically adding them to the incident page, enriching the context. So the moment I would jump into this, the first thing I would read through is essentially the description of the incident. So this is generated by one of our agents that starts off by giving a detailed breakdown of exactly what happened and a summary of the incidents that we've seen in this case over the last few hours. So the point here is that what would normally take time as a data engineer, start investigating, understand if there's different things failing, what the values of those data quality rule failures are, and try and get a cohesive picture. We'll do that automatically and point out that what we're seeing here is the average value of order amount in staging spiked to about 20,000, whereas the average was between 16 and 29, sorry. So huge anomaly already. We've got a separate monitor that's looking at the maximum order amount where we detected a value of 1 million. So it seems to be that this might have been caused by a single erroneous transaction that made its way into my staging table. And essentially then seeing that since both data sets are closely linked, it's also taking into account data lineage to explain that the error started here, and that's why we're seeing the impact all the way across. We've then got a breakdown of potential root causes. So highlighting what sort of steps should I investigate, what are the likely causes for this anomaly, and where essentially I should go from here. And even giving me the first steps to the investigation, so writing a SQL query so I can find out exactly which transactions in that time frame should I investigate that might have been the cause for this anomaly, pointing me to review recent ETL jobs and look at the logs for the tables that it saw through the lineage view that are linked together and are feeding into my fact orders table, and then pointing me to look at additional incidents to understand it might be a volume issue, there might be a join happening somewhere that went incorrectly. So giving me a full breakdown of here's what happened, here's when it happened, and here's essentially the actual values that were flagged as anomalies, then going all the way into potential root causes and steps to investigation. So from this point, if I want to get more detail, I can indeed open up my lineage view, and then by quickly expanding this, I can have a better view of exactly what this pipeline is looking like and how these errors could be happening. And so indeed, it's a little small, so I'll zoom in here for a second. I've got a good idea here of, I've got my raw customers table feeding into my dimension customers, and then the raw orders joining together essentially in the fact orders table. So it's likely that something happened potentially at this point here when we ran the join. And then from the overview page, I can deep dive even further, and this is where you'll see our more classic monitoring pages, and understand when these anomalies were detected. So if I open my max order amount, this is a monitor that's running every 15 minutes. And indeed, I can see that exactly at about 7:15 a.m., this is when we had the spike, and this is when the anomaly was detected. And it's likely what the other monitors will show me as well, that it's around the same time frame that we had this issue. So from here, I can jump into the other incident that we saw, which is a referential integrity check on customer ID, essentially when we're doing the join between raw orders and dimension customers. And here indeed, I'll summarize it so we don't all spend time reading through the text, but essentially, we're trying to figure out referential integrity at the moment of the join, and we saw that indeed in the last run of this monitor, about the same time, so 2 hours ago, same time as we started seeing incidents on the max orders amount, we had one violation essentially having an orphan where one transaction did not have a customer ID. So it's all pointing out to around the same time we had an issue where there seemed to be one row level item that was introduced into the data set that had a complete absurdity of an order amount that seems to be causing the issue and the incidents here. So as an analyst, again, I'm not necessarily going to fixing it. I might not have the rights to access to the raw or the staging Snowflake tables. But what I can do is I can try and give as much context to engineering and make things a bit easier. So I can select both of my incidents here, merge them together, because I believe that, let's say I pick the order amount, it's all tied to the same problem. And what this will do is it'll make a little already less noise. So I've got one incident with all 4 assets and all the monitors that were essentially pointed out that are linked here together. I can then essentially interact with the incident page, leave a comment, add any context to say, in my case, being the demo that we built together, quite obviously it's an anomaly. But in most cases, and what happens most often is, because anomalies aren't as obvious as this one, engineering won't necessarily know if we're monitoring a metric, if we're monitoring specific KPIs. Is it really an anomaly? What is the impact? How bad is it? How much should we prioritize it? And so I can add the context here and explain that yes, indeed, it's an anomaly. We shouldn't have any rows without a customer ID. The order amount is is definitely an aberration. There's no way this is legitimate. And add the context here. And then assign it as well. So maybe change the severity, make it critical, it's impacting an executive dashboard. And then assign data engineering, which is a team in Sifflet. So all the data engineers are assigned to this one in particular, and save it. And so essentially in a few minutes, what I've done here is, from an incident that showed up in my BI dashboard, I've jumped onto my data products page. I've had a look through to see which assets are impacted, what's the overall scale of the problem. I then had quick access to specific incidents where, thanks to Sifflet's AI agent, it took me essentially 1 minute on each to understand what's the anomaly, which monitor detected it, what's the downstream, upstream impact of it, and which steps should we start taking to try and remediate this. And I was able to join the two together, assign it to a team, so that now when everyone interacts with it, they've got the full context in this one incident of essentially this anomaly, this anomalous transaction that I'm trying to resolve. So the whole point of this feature here is to showcase how we go from dozens of alerts of multiple data quality rules failing all over the place into one single incident that's joining together all relevant anomalies, an AI agent that's summarizing everything, putting out first steps towards investigation, root cause analysis, and remediation as well, and essentially taking out hours of or days of engineering time that would have normally taken to get to this point. So from this point on, because I know that there's one transaction that's wrong, there's multiple steps I can take here. I can either go in myself if I have access to it, and start building more specific monitoring rules on my raw orders table. So as an example, that would be fairly easy to do in Sifflet. I could just open up my raw orders asset page, choose to create a new monitor, then jump over to my custom monitoring and have a simple rule that says I want to check if my order amount, and I know the value, the wrong one here was 1 million. So I'll say if anything is greater than 100,000 in this case, make it a full data set scan because I want to find everything historically. And I want to trigger an anomaly whenever it's more than, essentially, as soon as there's a value that matches these criteria, I want to trigger an incident and create an incident. So here I can use an AI assistant to generate a name and a description for this particular monitor. So just make sure that I've got a quick description that highlights what this monitor does, and nothing goes undocumented in the platform. Assign a notion of severity. Maybe in this case, I'll match it with the incident, make it critical. And then general using custom metadata fields or other tags or business terms from the governance perspective, make sure that I've got my housekeeping in order. Scheduling options here, if I want to do it as a standard, daily, hourly, or weekly, or use a cron expression to take it all the way down to maybe run it every 15 minutes. And then decide on whether I want to create an incident or not when this particular monitor fails. So it could be that in some cases, because I'm just investigating on my side, I don't want to create an incident because I don't want everyone to see when this monitor detects an anomaly. It's just for my own purpose. But so I might choose to add myself as the recipient via email because I want to be notified quickly as soon as an anomaly gets detected. So this is in the case where I found the incident, I've got a good idea of what I'm trying to look for and which details I'm missing. And what I'm missing is that particular row with this crazy transaction of 1 million in my raw orders table. And so what this will do is this will find that specific transaction and flag that row with all the context around it so that I'll be able to see, so I'll have all the information around that transaction, understand its anomaly, should be deleted, or exactly what happened there, as opposed to just point out there is this anomaly looking at the metric. But if I want to go a bit deeper, what I could do as well is just massively enrich my monitoring to see if what else was impacted. So I've got monitoring in place on my order amount. I've got monitoring in place on my customer IDs, but maybe there's other anomalies I'm missing in my data from what I'm seeing. And so the best way to do that would be to use our next agent called Sentinel to generate monitoring suggestions. And the way to use it is just as simple as that whole incident context was generated, is either from my data catalog page, and you can see that because I shifted the incident to critical, these are all now classified as urgent incidents ongoing on these assets, up from high-risk incidents. But I could just as easily from this page select a set of assets, so a set of tables, and click on auto monitoring. And this will essentially start triggering Sentinel to look at the asset level at metadata available at the column level and on the general asset page to make monitor suggestions for each of the columns. Or I could go from my data product page and rather than focusing on a subset of tables, request for monitoring suggestions at the overall data product level. And so while this does take a couple minutes to load, I'm just going to jump onto the results so we can look at the suggestions that Sentinel provides. But essentially, it's quite comprehensive. So what Sentinel will do is it'll look at all of these assets, understand what monitoring is already in place. It'll look at metadata tags available for each of the columns in those assets to take into account what is deemed critical, what is a critical data element, and try and propose as comprehensive as possible monitoring suggestions. And so if we have a quick look, so we were looking at my fact orders table where it sees that I've got a schema change monitoring, but it's going to start suggesting, why don't I also add duplicate rows detection? Maybe I've got duplicates that I'm not monitoring for because it knows what monitors are already in place. And so it's trying to fill in the gaps. Maybe look for unique order IDs because we saw indeed that, again, if we've got duplicates, maybe we're getting them from the order IDs as well, looking at uniqueness of customer IDs, looking at the average of order amount. So whereas before automatic monitoring tended to be very focused on freshness, volume, schema change, that's also something available in the platform and something that can be very easily deployed at scale in a few clicks. Where Sentinel comes in is really pushing anomaly detection to the next level by suggesting monitors on critical assets and looking at the column level. It's able to allow a user in just a few clicks. So these monitors are all pre-configured. All I'd have to do is essentially pick the ones I want to keep and the ones I want to remove, press create monitors, and these will be live. So from this point on, I'll essentially be running these monitors on all the assets that I've chosen to keep them on. And essentially it helps build out a much more comprehensive monitoring layer than anything that we might have done, particularly as we're ramping up observability at the beginning in a much shorter amount of time. So it's not something that we should look at as replacing custom monitoring. No one understands your data better than you do, and so having the most accurate business rules and the most accurate monitors in place is still going to be tied to data analysts or data engineers. But whereas getting to the point where all your monitoring requirements are met by a dedicated team might take a few months, you can have Sentinel on all your critical assets within a few days, if at most a few weeks. And so the goal here is to get to around 60% of monitoring requirements automatically without any effort on your teams where everyone's already busy and everyone's working on their day jobs, and really focus on that anomaly detection layer. Because what you might have noticed as well, if we look at our incident page, is that what Sifflet does when it looks at an incident is that it will pick up on all the monitors that it detects on a particular schema, on a data product, and try and build as complete of a vision as it can. But so the more monitors we have in place, the more context we feed our agents, and so the better picture it can paint as to what broke, what other anomalies should be added to incidents, and then the more accurate prescription it can give towards what steps should we take from an engineering perspective to maybe A, identify the original cause of the problem, and B, make sure that this issue doesn't happen again. And so that's how we created in Sifflet, through the use of multiple agents, a virtuous circle where by having an agent that can very easily suggest monitors and can be used just as much by analysts as engineers, and having all these fine-grained access controls. So this is, again, me as an analyst only working on my orders domain. So I don't have the option to start building expensive queries and explode my monitoring budget. I'm really just focusing on some critical assets that I have access to. But by having these tools in place, it's having a much more robust, much more comprehensive monitoring layer that can then ensure that as a user, you can leverage the incident creation and the incident page at its full potential by having everything summarized. So essentially all this noise translated into a very to the point, very comprehensive paragraph that you can essentially go through in a few minutes, rather than spending days or even a week investigating a problem and potential solutions. So obviously this whole flow, we spent about 20-25 minutes going through it together. But you can imagine how, if it's just you with the incident screen and with the monitors, it can probably go through it in 5-10 minutes. So really gaining huge efficiency in the whole incident anomaly detection and incident resolution flow. And Sifflet has yet a lot more features to offer, but we've wanted to focus today on how essentially our agents operate and how you can leverage them in the platform today. As I mentioned before, and I'll stop sharing my screen now. You will have access to the demo recording as well, so you'll be able to review it. And if you have any questions, I see that we've got a few minutes left, so happy to answer them now. And it looks like we're good. So thanks again, everyone, for attending. Thank you again, everyone, for attending. If you had questions you didn't get the chance to ask or to write throughout the demo, feel free to reach out afterwards as well. We're happy to take any questions and even maybe schedule a follow-up call to go into more detail. So appreciate everyone's time today, and have a wonderful evening. And right on time, we've got a question. So I'll answer that quickly before closing the demo. So indeed, we've got the known unknowns, but I believe that's where Sentinel comes in, right? Because by having an agent that you can, indeed, you still have to point it to the assets that you would want it to monitor. But by having pre-configured monitors on metrics you might not have thought of, and essentially allow it to enrich your monitoring layer through suggestions, that's, I suppose, it's the example that I was trying to show today of how you get to what I'm trying to look for is one transaction that's wrong. I don't know how it happened, but I want to find out that particular row in my raw orders table. If I use Sentinel, I'm able to deploy 100 different monitors that are looking for various anomalies on duplicates, maybe on different metrics, on maybe incorrect formats, missing emails, so all sorts of different anomalies that I don't have configured today, that I don't know that there's something wrong with. But the only way that works is by being able to do it through a few clicks, right? And having an agent that comes up with these suggestions and saves me tons of time and essentially will help point out what other potential anomalies I should look out for. And so again, where this used to be a risk is that if you do it and you start generating emails, you get very quickly alert fatigue. Because you might get false positive into something you want to tweak. But in this case, because not everything has to generate an incident, because you have all these controls in place of how you handle these monitors, as an analyst, you can very quickly build out these 100 monitors, just use them for your own sake, maybe not even trigger alerts, but just look at the incident page, look at monitor results, look at the general reporting dashboard, and essentially act on them once anomalies are detected. So then deep dive, then refine the monitoring rules, and go push even further. So I think the unknown unknowns is specifically what Sentinel is built to address. It's getting your monitoring or your observability control to a stage where it would have been difficult, if not impossible, to reach by focusing on, as you pointed out, the known unknowns. And I believe Andrea has a question around, do we have a target market? No constraints on who can use Sifflet today. We have customers from a wide multitude of verticals. So whether it's from the financial sector, retail, insurance, and many others, provided that you have enough of a need, of a use case to have observability in place, which I think is true for most modern companies today. You are a candidate for using our product for sure. But indeed, there are some constraints around some preferences on our side, let's say, around the stack that our customers have. All right. Well, as I mentioned before, if there's any questions that we didn't cover today, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to schedule a follow-up conversation and dive in more detail. I'm conscious we covered quite a bit of ground quickly. So appreciate everyone's time today. And again, wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.